What's up, guys? Rick here with your DFS preview for this week's AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, another course rotation. We will talk about that in just 1 second, but big shout out to all of you that I met at Torrey Pines last week. It was awesome. It was phenomenal. It's nice to put faces to names and meet new people. So thank you so much for all the support. I can't even believe it. Thank you for all the likes, all the subscribing to the video, all to the channels. It's beyond appreciated. So thanks again. Let's jump into this week at Pebble Beach. Not one, not two, but three courses. Again, we saw this at the American Express a couple of weeks ago. Same situation that we're getting here for the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am. By the name, you should know there are amateurs out there. And by the three-course rotation, by this point, you should realize that every golfer is going to play one round at each of the three courses: Pebble Beach, Monterey Peninsula, Spyglass Hill, and then there will be a 54-hole cut, and they will return to the host course, which is, of course, Pebble Beach. If you remember what we said a couple of weeks ago, and I still think it bears true, with a 54-hole cut, I think I'm more willing to kind of take on some duds or some scrubs, whatever you want to call them, basically just guys that are priced further down the board, long shots, flyers, whatever adjective you want to use to describe those types of golfers. I think it's still warranted, because if they do miss the cut, you're only missing out on one round's worth of fantasy data. And again, course rotations are pretty wonky, right? We've seen some longer shot winners here as well. Ted Potter Jr., remember when he outdueled Dustin Johnson? He was about 1,000,000 to 1. I think he was actually like 200 to 1 or something like that when he won. But it just creates volatility a little bit. But you do get some really sticky course history. So it's kind of weird. We'll walk the fine line for this week. You're going to hear about how short these courses are, and it's not necessarily incorrect. Basically, it's three courses, two par 72s and a par 71 that all play under 7,100 yards, something like that. Pebble Beach has some of the smallest greens on tour. So you really, essentially, what you get a lot of people saying are shorter hitters who are accurate off the tee have success here. That is the eye test, and it's not incorrect. However, if you run the regression model, driving distance again is one of the more correlated stats to success. And I'll tell you why, especially around Pebble Beach. Pebble Beach has a lot of natural landing areas. You can only hit it, let's say, 270 yards on this line. Everyone plays to the same spot. Well, off the tee, that's great for the short hitters, because they're going to be able to be in a position on their second shot to hit from where the long hitters are hitting from, which is very, very rare on the PGA Tour. The other thing is, however, when they all get to that spot in the fairway and they're all, 280 yards off the tee, the longer hitters are still hitting shorter clubs into these greens than the shorter hitters are. So while that distance, and maybe driving distance is not a good word to describe it this week, maybe it's clubhead speed. That clubhead speed is not necessarily shown as a big gap off the tee. It is a bigger gap on the approach shot. So keep that in mind. If you're hitting a pitching wedge in and your peer is hitting an 8-iron in, you are almost certainly going to have the edge in that scenario. So that is one thing that I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, because a lot of people are going to look at the regression model and they're going to say, I thought you didn't need to be long here. You don't. But driving distance is always, and especially here because of the way it pans out, a valuable asset. Now, there are differences in these courses, and one course in particular that I want to talk about, so that if you're playing showdown, if you're doing round-by-round betting, if you're entering props, if you're doing first-round leader, things like that, the courses matter. So both Monterey Peninsula and Pebble Beach, kind of similar in terms of scoring averages. They're going to be the easier two courses. They're the easier fairways to hit. They're the easier greens to hit. To put it into perspective, Monterey Peninsula, the last time we saw it in 2020, basically the fourth easiest fairways to hit and the easiest greens to hit. Pebble Beach, about the sixth easiest fairways to hit and about middle of the road in terms of difficulty for greens and regulation. But Spyglass Hill, it was about middle of the road in fairways hit, but they were the eighth hardest greens to hit out of 51 courses last year. Only about 58% of players hitting a green in regulation. That's a big deal. And I don't know if we're going to see books be savvy enough or pricing be savvy enough to kind of stay up to date with the scoring, especially as it starts. So this is where I think there's a big edge this week, not only showdown, but also in setting props. So I know that you guys know about me that when something new comes out, I kind of vet it. And if I get excited about it, I start to work it into the tools because the tools are built for me, and I just hope that you guys like them as well. So I did the same thing with stock market, DFS, and jock market, and I've been getting a lot into props and specifically PrizePicks. And if you haven't played on PrizePicks, I can pull it up here. It is basically an over-under game. You can pick which props that you want to put into your entries. Obviously, they have other sports besides golf, but I think for this week, and we're going to see this as the props get released later in the week, what are they going to do for the guys that are playing on Spyglass Hill? Because some of the categories that you set props are in, there's fantasy score, which is basically your scoring average. There's how many greens they're going to hit, how many fairways they're going to hit, how many birdies or better they're going to make. Those are going to be big differences depending on the course. So I'm waiting to see for when the prop lines get released to see what they're going to do for guys that are starting specifically at Spyglass Hill. When you remember, only 58% of greens in regulation were hit there. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out. I've been loving the props. If you go to PrizePicks, and I'll put a link in the description, use my code Rick. It helps you. It helps me. It'll get you up to a instant $100 or 100% deposit bonus up to $100. I've been playing a lot more. I'm going to be playing a lot more. So I think that there's a lot of savviness that we can put into this, and we can kind of make some money together. Let's go over to the cheat sheet. Only 4 golfers priced over $10,000. Patrick Cantlay leads the way at $11,200. Will Zalatoris gets the nod over Daniel Berger for the second most expensive golfer. He's 10.8, Berger's 10.5, and then Jordan Spieth at 10.3. That's it. We've got to talk about these guys, and I want to talk about them kind of in these terms. I want to go over to the power rankings here, and I'll just do players in this field. And actually, you know what? Let's go to the weighted strokes gained. Last 50 rounds or so. There are 2 guys that stand alone here. It is Patrick Cantlay and it is Daniel Berger. Daniel Berger has a huge gap from him, the second best golfer in weighted strokes gained, to Seamus Power. And then Cantlay has an even basically the same gap on Berger. It's insane. Basically, the gap between Cantlay and Seamus Power, first to third, is the same gap from Power, third, to Tyler McCumber, who is like 91st on this list. That's the gap. So what I'm trying to illustrate here is that when you look at the weighted strokes gained, which uses strength of field for every round that these guys are playing, amongst other items, I could talk about it for a couple of hours, there's 2 guys at the top. Patrick Cantlay, priced correctly as the most expensive, but similar to Jon Rahm last week, the gap's not big enough, right? The gap, Jon Rahm should have been $13,000 last week. Patrick Cantlay should probably be $12,000. It's not necessarily reflective of how much better Cantlay has actually been. So I think there's built-in value there, and I think there's built-in value on Daniel Berger, who is not even the most expensive golfer. Will Zalatoris is. So no knock against Zalatoris, but looking at this, very early pricing, it just came out. It would be very difficult to roster Will Zalatoris outside of saying, I'm playing game theory. I'm going to try to win all the money. I'm going to try to be different. And it's not a knock on him. He's been awesome this year. It is just the way the pricing came out. Patrick Cantlay's been phenomenal at this event. Daniel Berger is obviously your defending champion. He has 3 straight top 10s in the only 3 times that he's played this. I'm actually pretty impressed with Daniel Berger that he was able to finish T20 last week on a course that doesn't necessarily fit him all that well. He didn't pay himself off because he was $10,000 and he was the 5th most expensive golfer, but that's an even better result than I would have expected. So I could not be probably more excited about Daniel Berger moving forward, and we're going to get into a really good stretch of golf for him. And it starts right now. The other guy here, Jordan Spieth. So unfortunately, unless you're playing game theory, you probably can't play Will Zalatoris. And unless you're taking just an absolute deep flyer and you are a course horse buff, you can't really play Jordan Spieth. Let me bring him up here on the golfer profiles. Spieth is really struggling. And when I say really struggling, I mean it. He has lost strokes to the field in 6 of his last 7 starts. And a lot of them. He's lost over 30 strokes to the field during that stretch. That is now officially the worst 7-event stretch of Jordan Spieth's career. You can start going back, and you can looking at kind of some of these downtimes over the last couple of years, especially into 2020. He was not statistically as bad then as he was now. And you can say, Rick, half of those strokes came at the Hero World Challenge where he lost 16 and he was out of it and all that good stuff. Yes, your point, well taken. But look at the other events. You know, the non-measured. I mean, the Hero World Challenge was a non-measured event. He's lost strokes on approach in 6 of 7. He's lost strokes off the tee in 4 of 6. Even the putter hasn't been as good. I'm fairly concerned here. And we are going to find out this week whether Spieth can kind of flip the script, because he's been phenomenal at Pebble, right? Like, what is it? Is it course history or is it recent form? Because Jordan Spieth's got the win, a bunch of other top 10s. He's been phenomenal here. What version of Jordan Spieth are we going to get? I am worried. I am hoping to see signs of life. I will not be an investor of Jordan Spieth this week, but if he gets it going, you know, we are 60-something days away from Augusta National. And this is an important stretch for him here and in Phoenix. And just as we lead into, you know, that first full week of April, we're going to learn so much about Jordan Spieth this week, but I do not believe it's going to be with me as an investor. This 9K range, oh mama, there is a lot to like here. I might consider, if I didn't think Cantlay and Berger were so head and shoulders above the rest of this field, I'd consider skipping the 10K range entirely, because you've got Jason Day. If you think Jordan Spieth's tournament history is good here, go look at Jason Day's. Basically everything but a victory. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 top 10s in 9 starts, including basically 5 in a row, and then the one that snapped that streak was an 11th. So I'm going to basically give him 7 in a row. He has just been dominant here. We're seeing a better version of Jason Day. Jason Day made a couple of comments last week at Torrey Pines where he says, you know, it doesn't even feel like I'm injured anymore, which is obviously a great sign for someone who has battled injury. And when you're hurt, you can't practice. You know, it's hard to find practice time. That came out like Allen Iverson, didn't it? Practice? It's hard to find practice time. We are seeing a better version. I mean, he's never going to go back to that time where he won like 7 times in 17 months or whatever. That was unbelievable moment in golf history. But we're starting to see better and better signs out of Jason Day. So you got to love him there. Justin Rose, again, hat tip to Justin Rose. He's kind of fixing himself. Remember, and I said this last week, and he kind of paid it off last week at Torrey Pines. Remember when in the summer he was just reliant on the putter? We're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing a well-rounded golfer. He gained 5.4 strokes on approach last week. Again, that's only 3 measured rounds, and that is his best event since the 2019 WGC FedEx St. Jude, and that was only 3 rounds. So, I mean, he is just ball striking the heck out of it. He is much more well-rounded. This is what you want to see from Justin Rose. So that's exciting as well. Who else do we have here? Mav McNeely, back-to-back top 5 finishes. He's at this event. He knows Pebble Beach like the back of his hand, literally grew up on the golf course. I'm optimistic on him this year, as I've talked about plenty of times. Cameron Tringale, this feels like we're about to break through, right? Cameron Tringale holds the unfortunate distinction of making more money than anybody on the PGA Tour, $14 million without a victory, which is crazy. And he's put himself in contention a handful of times here recently, 3 top 7 finishes in his last 5. Doesn't drive it as well as some of these other guys, but he can get away with it around these courses. I'm super optimistic. I think this is a week he could break through. Seamus Power, he was the 3rd in the power rankings. Matt Fitzpatrick, you could argue just based on like OWGR and class of golfer, he's the most mispriced golfer in this field. Like, it's crazy. Have I ever liked 6 consecutive guys in a row? Can I just play all of these guys in the 9K? So, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to make some decisions, obviously, because we can't play all of these guys. And I imagine that McNeely will carry a lot of ownership because we're going to get the Pebble Beach narrative, right? He's got a house out there. He's played it 1 billion times or whatever. the back-to-back top 5 finishes. Yeah, we're going to get that this week. It's a little bit scary, but I think if you're looking for a pivot, he's probably the spot, and we'll know as the week goes on, especially when we get to Wednesday for the live chat, 3 p.m. Eastern time on the Rick Run Good YouTube channel. We'll know what that ownership is shaping up to be, and we'll be much more informed. Tringale feels like the pivot, right? The guy that no one's going to talk about, especially because there's so many other guys in this range. And he went toe-to-toe with Jon Rahm on Sunday, beat him by a stroke, didn't blink in what was the penultimate grouping at Torrey Pines. He looked sharp. I followed that group for quite a bit of time, and I was impressed with what I saw from Cameron Tringale. So I imagine that's probably your pivot play. The guys in the bottom of the 9K, I'm very interested to see how this shapes up because Streelman is another kind of elite course history guy, right? He's gone 13th, runner-up, 7th, 6th, 14th, and 17th in his last 6 years. Form not as great coming in. Kisner, however, I got to give a shout to Kevin Kisner because I don't roster and I don't invest in Kevin Kisner maybe as much as I should, but when you start to look at what he's been up to, the win at the Wyndham Championship, that was a bit of an outlier at the moment, but what we're seeing now is a return to that type of play, gaining multiple strokes on approach. Last time we saw him at the Sony Open, gained across the board. So he played twice this year in 2022, both ends of the Hawaiian swing, T8, T3. This is probably one of the better spots for him on the PGA Tour because he's not an overly long hitter of the golf ball. Is that what I want to say? I guess it is. So interested to see what everybody does with this 9K range. It's fascinating. I could spend probably 9 more hours on it. We'll talk on the live chat and we'll talk, on Twitter Spaces about this, but very, very, very excited about this $9,000 range. Before I jump into the $8,000 range, there's 2 things that I want to look at in the Holy Grail here because there's a couple of narratives you're going to be constantly hearing about this week. The first one is that, this course is so short. Okay, whatever. Let's just pump in courses under 7,100 yards. Okay, courses under 7,100 yards, open it up to the last, 14 years, going back to 2008, just players in this field. Who has been the best? Well, Michael Thompson and Taylor Moore, they only have a handful of rounds. That's not what I want to look at. Let's look at maybe the last 3 years. We'll go back to the start of 2020. Patrick Cantlay. With anybody with a sample size, Patrick Cantlay is number 1. 26 rounds, gaining 2 strokes per round. Daniel Berger is up there. Mav McNeely, Seamus Power. Lucas Glover. We're going to talk about him when we get to the 7s. Christian Bezuidenhout. He's the first guy in the $8,000 range that pops up. He's gaining over a stroke per round. Brendan Todd is up there. He's in the 7s. Adam Svensson, smaller sample size. And then Matt Kuchar at 7,600. So there's only one guy in this $8,000 range that on short courses tends to prosper. That's Christian Bezuidenhout. So keep that in mind. The other thing we're going to hear about all week long is strength of field. So what I also want to do is I want to this strength of field is going to be it's going to be about a 212. It's actually going to be a lot better than it was last year. It's going to be similar to the Fortinet and it's going to be similar to the 3M Open. So I'm just going to say strength of field between 175 and 250. This is not an exact science, but let me just run that out there and see who pops up. And I got to open this up a little bit wider than just the last 3 years because that's not a strength of field range that we normally get into. Number 1, Justin Rose. 35 rounds, gaining nearly 2 strokes per round in these weaker field events. His win at the Zurich Classic came in that range. Couple of other top 15s in there as well. Mito Pereira has about half the rounds as Justin Rose. T6, third. T31, T29. Those are the 4 events he's played. Jason Day as well. So you're seeing a trend here, aren't you? It's that 9,000, couple guys in the 8s, maybe Mito, maybe Bezuidenhout. Maybe those are the paths that we want to go, but you can continue to dive into this as much as you want. The way that I see this $8,000 range is quite interesting. Ryan Palmer was phenomenal from tee to green last week. Could not make a putt. He's had really bad success at Pebble Beach. I think this is one of the stickier course histories, so I'm going to lean on course history a bit more than I would normally like to. So when there's other great options here, Ryan Palmer probably not going to be making my short list of golfers to play this week. Lonto Griffin, on the other hand, Did finish 30th last week, but he had basically, I believe it was like the round of the day on Sunday. Went out there, fired something low. That's what you want to see out of Lanto. We already talked about Bezuidenhout. Tom Hoge. Tom Hoge is kind of interesting, right? What do you know about Tom Hoge? Well, you know that he is a boom or bust golfer, which this actually might be too expensive for someone like that, but with the field strength and kind of the names that are in it, you kind of have to throw out the fact that Hoge is usually much cheaper than this. But he's got 2 top 4 finishes in his last 4, half of his last 4 starts. The other 2 are missed cuts. He is generally a very good approach player, and when things go well, he finishes well, which is always good to see. And the last time that we saw him at this event, he finished 12th, which was last year. Mito made one of those filters that I put up on the Holy Grail. This is his first trip to Pebble Beach. Interesting to see how that shapes out. But those are probably, my favorite guys in the 8K. So it's probably Lanto, it's probably Bezuidenhout, a little bit of Hoge maybe, depending on what type of risk tolerance you have and what you're looking for. And then Mito, who, might just ball strike the heck out of it in a weak field like this and get himself into contention. The $7,000 range. A couple of interesting names. Lucas Glover stuck out to me basically immediately. He's made his last 2 cuts here. One of them was a 7th place finish. That was in 2019. He finished 5th at the Sony. Let's go to his golfer profile page because Glover is probably one of the few guys in this range that has what I believe to be legitimate win equity. And the reason that I think that is not only because of the John Deere Classic that he won 13 events ago, but look at the advanced profile here. It's always very good on approach, and he's been better, not good, better recently with the putter. And when you're a 0 putter at the Sony Open and your name is Lucas Glover, you're going to finish T5. That's what he needs to be. So he's got 2 straight starts in which he was basically a 0 with the putter. Very, very exciting, and he's done it 3 of his last 4. Also, I don't want to use the same verbiage, but he is about half as bad on POA, which is the same thing I said about Luke List last week. Just be like, half as bad or twice as good or whatever it is. But I do think he owns legitimate win equity in this field. The other one here is Minwoo Lee, and we'll see what everyone does with Minwoo because he's generally playing on the European Tour. The last couple of times that we've seen him come over and play PGA Tour events are WGCs or majors, and they haven't always gone well, although he did finish T28 at the WGC at Concession early in 2021. So I think maybe that's what people remember the most, but he won the Scottish Open in the summer. He's a good player. He's got 3 top 8 finishes in his last 4. He is a sharp, talented golfer that is now going to be able to play in arguably, I'm just kind of scrolling through his starts here. This is probably the easiest PGA Tour field he's been in. Not worldwide. Obviously, he's played weaker fields in Europe. But in terms of PGA Tour fields, this is probably one of, if not the weakest field that he's played in. So he might be the flavor of the week. We'll see how that ownership checks in on Wednesday. But it would be for good reason. Couple of other names at the bottom of the $7,000 range that move the needle a little bit for me. Sahith Theegala has now made not only 3 consecutive cuts, but basically getting better finishes each and every week. 48th at the Sony, 33rd at the American Express, 25th at the Farmers. I believe he just accepted a sponsor's invite for Phoenix, so this is probably going to be at least a 5-event stretch for him as he tries to, lock up as many points and as much money as possible. He's 7,200. Brandon Harkins is kind of interesting. So Harkins won on the Korn Ferry last week, but if I remember correctly, that event ended on Wednesday or Thursday, I believe, which is because the Korn Ferry is kind of off schedule now. And that, to me, is a much better situation for these guys who have like the extra time to win, then get prepared, come up to to get to Pebble Beach, get ready. He's made the cut the last 2 times he's played this event. 2019, he finished 28th. 2018, he finished 15th. That could be an interesting little nugget for guys that won't like he's not going to pop in anybody's model, right? Like his PGA Tour stuff hasn't been great. The fantasy numbers recently haven't been awesome, but wins last week on the Korn Ferry, gets the extra couple of days, goes to maybe one of the better spots for him. So I continue to be interested in that. I'll also lump Grayson Sigg into like the Sahith conversation, which is, 3 pretty decent finishes in a row, 3 top 40s in a row, 1 top 25 at the American Express. He's a golfer that I think is going to continue to get better and better each week that we see him. Very talented player out of, I believe, went to the University of Nebraska. The $6,000 range, oh boy, it's not pretty. Let's be real. Adam Svensson is here. Svensson's now made 3 cuts in a row. We talk about his talent all the time. He's 6,900. Doc Redman played well last week. I think he had a good, what day would that have been? Thursday and a good Saturday. Rounds 2 and rounds 4. Finished 25th at the Farmers. This is a very different setup than what he just saw at Torrey Pines, but starting to see signs of life from Doc. Starting to see them. Here's one. Here's a really deep flyer, and I'll show you his golfer profile because this is it's a little bit scary, but we are in a range where almost everything is scary. Satoshi Kodaira is down here. And what do we know about Kodaira? Well, last year I think he was something like 8th in driving accuracy and 190th in distance. So he's not a long hitter, which would always be beneficial, but it's not a prerequisite for success around Pebble Beach. So we know that, okay? We also know that when we saw him at the Sony, he finished T12. That's his only start of 2022. And that profile that I'm showing on the page right now, gaining strokes across the board, leading the way with his approach play, only gaining a couple of strokes with the putter, that's exciting. I know it's only one start, but if we're trying to be early on a guy that's probably getting a pretty good setup for him at a time that's probably pretty good for him, I think we could do a lot worse than Kodaira. I actually wish he was cheaper than this, but he's not. He's $6,900. What else do we have down here? Peter Malnati is kind of interesting. Followed him for a bit last week. He was playing well. Finished 25th at Farmers. That was a much stronger field. And then you get guys with some decent history around here. Trey Mullinax, it's been a while. He hasn't played here since 2019, but had made 3 cuts in a row. 2 of them were top 25s. And then this is really that time of year where guys like Brian Gay, you have to consider. He's $6,400. He's missed 2 cuts at the Sony and at the American Express. But here, he's made 8 cuts in a row. He's made 8 cuts in a row, a top 10 in 2019, a top 10 in 2018. I say this a lot. There's probably 3 to 5 spots on tour where Brian Gay can pile up top 10s, back-to-back top 10s in multiple years. And this is certainly one of them, and the results bear it out. What's the lowest I'd be willing to go here? Sungyeol No's made the cut in 2 straight, which is more than you could have said for him for a long time. He's 6,200. He was really struggling for a while, and it was just miscut. Has made 2 cuts in a row. They're both not good finishes, but at $6,200, if he makes the cut, you're probably pretty happy with it. Let me just run a model and see if I can find some more value here. This is the model at custom model at RickRunGood.com. I'm going with 30 rounds, last 30. I will start to narrow this down, get closer to 24 as more guys start playing. I think there's 2 ways to build models this week. I think you can play the accuracy birdie or better game, or you could play like the driving distance game. As we discussed at the top, I think there's 2 ways to get this done. Obviously, the driving distance is more like club head speed this week. So let me do, or you could play the buckets game. You could play like the 125 to 150 game where a lot of these shots are going to come from. Let's do that. Just because we always do the driving distance one. So let's do, I still want weighted strokes gained total to be a chunk, like 33. And then I'll do accuracy for, call it 25. I'll do the bucket. I'll do 125 to 150. Whoops. If I can actually type these in here. Okay. So that leaves me with 17. And then I think I just got to go like pure birdie or better here. So this is a pretty unique model for me. We're using a bucket, which I know has its flaws, but there's only a couple of places where you'd want to use those buckets. It's using accuracy. And then also factoring in the weighted strokes game, which I like as well. So this is last 30 rounds. My top golfers are, oh boy, I'm not going to get away from Daniel Berger this week, am I? He's number 1. So I was hoping we were going to see some interesting names, and we are. Daniel Berger still number 1. Seamus Power number 2. Austin Eckroat number 3. Do we have to deep dive Austin Eckroat before we get out of here? Yeah, so I only have 44 rounds on him this year. Looks like he missed the cut at the Farmers, but he missed it on the number. Played well in Bermuda, played well at the Wyndham Championship. He seems to be a pretty decent ball striker. Plays well on the Korn Ferry. Accurate. I mean, these are very few rounds, but 44th in driving accuracy this year, 57th in birdie or better, 15th in par 4 scoring. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Very, very cheap. Let's go back to the model here. Eckroat 6,800. My third best golfer, believe it or not, with this kind of out-of-the-box constraints that I've put in. Hayden Buckley is 4. Patrick Cantlay, 5. Tom Hoagie, 6. Okay, that's cool. So Hoagie kind of passed the eye test for me, the sniff test for me, and then also finds his way into the model. Cameron Tringale, 7. Yeah, I'll probably bet Tringale this week. Matthias Schwab is 8. Justin Rose, 9. Chad Ramey, 10. So here's the way I see this. It's going to be hard not to get exposure to Berger, Cantlay, Tringale, Rose. Those were guys that I kind of liked already, and now the model's pumping them out. Values might lie within Eckroat, Buckley, Hoagie, although Hoagie's more expensive this week than he's ever been. We'll have to do a little bit of a deeper dive on Matthias Schwab. And then Chad Ramey, I played him a couple of weeks ago pretty significantly, and I do not think that worked out. So we might have to go and check that one out again. All right, I'll stop there. There's going to be obviously a lot more content coming this week with Tuesday and Wednesday Twitter Spaces and the Wednesday live chat. And tune into the Scramble. That's a live show. Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Andy Lack and myself, we're going to be going through basically everything that you want, and that's a way to be interactive. So I really hope you join us for that. And yeah, let me know who you think is going to win this week. Go sign up at PrizePicks. Helps me, helps you. And I think there's going to be a lot of exploitation on our side this week because I think we're going to be able to take advantage. Best of luck. I'll talk to you guys soon.